As you watch this video, please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that whenever I post a new video, you will be the first to be notified. Roots of a Friendship. In the heart of Omuoma, a village nestled in the lush countryside of Nigeria, life moved at a slow, rhythmic pace. The villagers lived in harmony with the land, planting yams in the rainy season and celebrating harvests with elaborate festivals. Amid this simple but vibrant setting, two boys, Chike and Tund, were born into neighboring families. From the moment they could walk, Chike and Tund were inseparable. Their parents, who were close friends, often joked that the boys were more like twins than neighbors. They played in the dusty streets, climbed mango trees, and fished in the nearby river. While other children had occasional fights, Chike and Tund never argued. Their personalities complemented each other perfectly. Chike was bold and curious, always eager to explore new places or try new things. Tund, more thoughtful and cautious, often served as the voice of reason. When Chike suggested sneaking into the old abandoned mill at the edge of the village, Tund was the one who brought lanterns and rope, just in case. At Amadi Primary School, their bond became even more evident. The boys were brilliant students, often competing for the top spot in their class. Chike excelled in mathematics and science, while Tund was a natural writer who loved crafting stories for the school's literary club. Together, they formed a dynamic duo, supporting each other through challenges and celebrating their successes as one. By the time they graduated from Kingsman Secondary School, their friendship had become a source of inspiration for the entire village. The elders often spoke of their potential, predicting that the boys would achieve great things and put Omuoma on the map. Dreams beyond Omuoma. Leaving Omuoma was a bittersweet experience. The village had shaped Chike and Tund, but they knew their dreams lay beyond its borders. Their acceptance into Kingsman University marked the beginning of a new chapter. At the university in Lagos, they faced challenges they had never encountered before. The city was loud and bustling, a stark contrast to the quiet life of Omuoma. Initially, they struggled to adjust. Chike often found himself overwhelmed by the competitive nature of his petroleum engineering program, while Tund, who had chosen business administration, had to work extra hard to keep up with the demanding coursework. Despite these challenges, their friendship remained a constant source of strength. They shared a cramped dorm room and often stayed up late discussing their dreams. Chike talked about working in the oil industry, inspired by stories of wealth and success. Tund dreamed of starting a business that would provide jobs for people like those in their village. Their time at Kingsman University was marked by both triumphs and hardships. Chike secured an internship with a prominent oil firm during his third year, while Tund joined the student government, honing his leadership skills. Though their paths were beginning to diverge, their bond remained unshaken. The NYSC adventure. Graduation brought both excitement and uncertainty. As the time came for their National Youth Service Corps, NYSC, postings, they were thrilled to learn they had been assigned to the same state, Rivers. Moving to Port Harcourt together felt like destiny's way of ensuring their friendship continued uninterrupted. Port Harcourt was a city of contrasts, where gleaming skyscrapers stood alongside overcrowded slums. For Chike and Tund, it was a place of opportunity but also one of challenges. They rented a modest apartment and quickly fell into a routine, supporting each other as they adjusted to life in the bustling city. During NYSC, Chike worked with a petroleum firm where he impressed his supervisors with his technical skills and innovative ideas. Tund was assigned to a government agency where he excelled in organizing community outreach programs. Though their work environments were vastly different, they found common ground in their shared ambitions and late-night conversations. One evening, as they sat on their balcony overlooking the city, Chike made a promise. "No matter where life takes us, we'll always have each other's backs," he said. Tund nodded, sealing the pact with a handshake. Diverging paths. When NYSC ended, the realities of life after service set in. Chike, armed with his degree and internship experience, quickly secured a position with Global Energy Corp, one of the country's largest oil companies. His starting salary was impressive, and his prospects for growth seemed limitless. Tund, on the other hand, faced a much harder road. Despite his qualifications and leadership experience, he struggled to find a job. He attended countless interviews, each ending with polite rejections. Frustration mounted as weeks turned into months. Eventually, out of desperation, Tund accepted a job as a security guard at a bank. Though the work was far beneath his qualifications, it provided a steady income. Chaik, ever the supportive friend, sent him money occasionally and encouraged him to keep trying. However, Tund's pride began to suffer. He couldn't help but compare his struggles to Chaik's rapid success. While Chaik climbed the corporate ladder, Tund was stuck in a uniform, guarding doors. Chaik's rise to power. Chaik's career flourished. Within 5 years, he was promoted to managing director of Global Energy Corporation. His rise was the talk of the industry, and his name became synonymous with innovation and leadership. Despite his busy schedule, Chaik never forgot his promise to Tund. One evening, he called his friend with life-changing news. "Tund, there's an opening at my company. It's not a senior role, but it's a start. I've recommended you for it," he said. Tund accepted the offer, grateful for the opportunity to leave his job as a security guard. Working at Global Energy Corp felt like a fresh start, and for a time, the two friends seemed to pick up where they had left off. Seeds of envy. When Chaik secured Tund a job at Global Energy Corp, it seemed like a turning point in their lives. Tund's new position as a junior operations officer marked a significant improvement from his previous job as a security guard at the bank. He now wore a suit to work, had an office desk, and interacted with colleagues on projects. For the first few weeks, Tund was filled with gratitude. Chaik, now the managing director, was delighted to have his childhood friend working alongside him. He made sure to introduce Tund to key figures in the company, gave him tips on navigating corporate culture, and even encouraged him to pursue further training to enhance his skills. "Remember, Tund," Chaik said during one of their conversations, "this is just the beginning. With hard work and dedication, you can climb the ladder here." Tund smiled and nodded, but beneath his calm exterior, a storm was brewing. The subtle shift. At first, Tund's feelings of gratitude were genuine. He was thankful for the opportunity to work at such a prestigious company and proud to tell his family and friends about his new role. However, as the weeks turned into months, he began to notice the stark differences between his life and Chaik's. Chaik was a commanding presence in the company, respected by employees at all levels. His office, located on the top floor, was spacious and elegantly furnished, while Tund's workspace was a modest cubicle on the lower floors. During meetings, Chaik's opinions were sought after and valued, while Tund often felt invisible. What stung the most was seeing Chaik's lifestyle. He drove a sleek car, lived in an upscale neighborhood, and traveled abroad for business meetings. Tund, meanwhile, struggled to make ends meet, barely able to afford his modest apartment and monthly expenses. Each interaction with Chaik began to feel like a reminder of their unequal positions. When Chaik offered advice or encouragement, Tund interpreted it as patronizing. When Chaik invited him to company dinners or social gatherings, Tund felt out of place among the executives and their polished spouses. The admiration Tund once felt for Chaik turned into resentment. "He acts like he's doing me a favor," Tund thought bitterly. "He doesn't see me as an equal anymore." The strain on their friendship. As Tund's resentment grew, he began to distance himself from Chaik. He stopped joining him for lunch and avoided his calls outside of work. When they passed each other in the hallways, their exchanges became brief and formal. Chaik, puzzled by the change, tried to address it. "Tund, is everything okay?" he asked one afternoon. "You've been distant lately." "I'm fine," Tund replied curtly. "Just busy with work." Chaik, ever the optimist, assumed Tund was simply adjusting to his new role. He decided to give him space, believing their friendship would eventually return to normal. But in Tund's mind, every interaction with Chaik fed his insecurities. He began to believe that Chaik had only brought him into the company to control him, to keep him in a position where he would always be subordinate. Comparing the past and present, Tund often thought back to their childhood in Umuoma, when they were equals in every sense. They had attended the same schools, shared the same dreams, and celebrated each other's successes. Back then, Tund felt like he could match Chaik in intellect and ambition. But now, their lives couldn't be more different. Chaik had become a symbol of success, while Tund felt like a shadow of his former self. The more he dwelled on their differences, the more his resentment grew. "It's not fair," Tund thought late one night as he stared at the ceiling of his apartment. "We were supposed to rise together, but he's left me behind. He's forgotten what it's like to struggle." The catalyst. The tipping point came during a company event. It was a grand gala to celebrate the company's latest achievements, held at one of the city's most luxurious hotels. Chaik, as managing director, was the star of the evening, delivering a rousing speech that drew thunderous applause. Tund, seated at a table in the back of the hall, watched in silence. He couldn't help but notice the way everyone fawned over Chaik, praising his leadership and vision. To Tund, the event felt like a celebration of Chaik's success and a stark reminder of his own mediocrity. Later that evening, as Chaik made his rounds greeting guests, he approached Tund's table. "Tund," he said warmly, "I'm glad you could make it. How are you finding the event?" "It's fine," Tund replied stiffly, forcing a smile. Chaik didn't seem to notice Tund's discomfort. "Good. Let's catch up properly soon. We've both been so busy." As Chaik walked away, Tund's smile faded. "Busy," he muttered under his breath. "Busy being the king of the castle, while I'm stuck at the bottom." The spiral of resentment. From that night on, Tund's thoughts became darker. He started blaming Chaik for everything wrong in his life. Every challenge he faced at work, every rejection he had endured before joining the company, he traced it all back to Chaik. "He could have done more for me," Tund thought. "He could have given me a better position. He just wants me to stay beneath him so he can feel superior." Tund's bitterness began to affect his work. He became less motivated, his performance slipping. Colleagues noticed his change in demeanor, but Tund dismissed their concerns. A dangerous idea. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day at work, Tund sat in his apartment, nursing a glass of whiskey. As the alcohol dulled his senses, a dangerous thought crept into his mind. What if Chaik wasn't there anymore, he wondered. What if the spotlight was finally off him? At first, he dismissed the idea as ridiculous. But the thought lingered, growing stronger with each passing day. He began to see Chaik not as a friend, but as an obstacle, someone who needed to be removed for him to finally step out of the shadows. Tund's resentment had crossed a line, setting the stage for a betrayal that would shatter their lives forever. The plot. Tund's resentment toward Chaik began as a small ember, fueled by feelings of inadequacy and envy. However, over time, that ember grew into a raging fire that consumed his every thought. Each day at work, Tund watched Chaik effortlessly command respect and wield influence. Chaik's success, once a source of pride for Tund, now felt like a constant reminder of his own perceived failures. A dark transformation. Tund started withdrawing from Chaik. He avoided his calls, skipped the lunch invitations, and stayed late at work to avoid casual interactions. When they did speak, Tund's responses became curt, his tone colder than before. Chaik, oblivious to the growing animosity, thought his friend was simply stressed or overwhelmed with his workload. But in Tund's mind, every interaction with Chaik was a humiliation. He saw Chaik's advice as patronizing, his mentorship as an attempt to assert dominance. Tund began to believe that Chaik's success was not just luck, but came at his expense. "He thinks he's better than me," Tund often muttered to himself. "I'll show him." As his jealousy festered, Tund started considering ways to level the playing field. What began as fleeting thoughts soon evolved into a chilling plan. The first steps. Tund's opportunity came during a casual conversation with Emeka, a former employee of Global Energy Corp who had been laid off during a company restructuring. Emeka, bitter and resentful, frequently spoke about how unfairly he had been treated by the company, and by Chaik in particular. One evening, after a few drinks at a local bar, Tund decided to test the waters. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "sometimes I wonder if people like Chaik even deserve to be where they are." Emeka laughed bitterly. That man ruined my life. If I had the chance, I'd make him pay. Tund hesitated for a moment, then leaned in closer. What if we could? Emeka looked at him, surprised. What are you saying? Tund shook his head, feigning reluctance. Just a thought. Forget I said anything. But the seed had been planted. Building the conspiracy. Over the next few weeks, Tund and Emeka met several times in secret. At first, their conversations were vague, but as trust grew, Tund began outlining his plan. It has to look like an accident or a random attack, he said. No one can trace it back to us. Emeka, though initially hesitant, agreed to help. He introduced Tund to two other disgruntled former employees, both of whom harbored deep grudges against Chaik. The group began meeting late at night in a secluded part of town, plotting the details of their attack. Tund funded the operation, using his savings to purchase burner phones and pay for the weapons they would use. He carefully avoided leaving a paper trail, instructing his co-conspirators to destroy any evidence that could link them to the crime. Remember, Tund warned them during one of their meetings, if any of you talk, we're all finished. The final plans. The group decided on a date and time for the attack. Tund, who knew Chaik's routines well, provided detailed information about his schedule. He usually works late on Fridays, Tund said. He takes the same route home every time, and the road is always quiet after 8 p.m. Emeka and the others scouted the route, identifying a secluded stretch of road where they could ambush Chaik's car. They rehearsed the plans several times, ensuring that everything would go smoothly. Despite his meticulous planning, Tund couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. On the night before the attack, he paced his small apartment, his mind racing. For a moment, he considered calling it off. But the thought of Chaik's success, his smiling face, his confident demeanor, rekindled his anger. He deserves this, Tund whispered to himself. He brought this on himself. The night of the attack. The fateful night arrived. Chaik, as usual, worked late at the office, going over reports for an upcoming board meeting. When he finally left, he was exhausted but satisfied with his progress. As he drove down the quiet road toward his home, he had no idea he was being followed. Emeka and his accomplices waited in the shadows, their car parked just out of sight. As Chaik's car approached, they sprang into action. One of them threw a spike strip onto the road, puncturing Chaik's tires and forcing him to stop. Before Chaik could react, the attackers descended upon him. The ambush was quick and brutal, leaving Chaik with no chance to fight back. His cries for help echoed briefly before fading into the night. The attackers fled the scene, leaving Chaik's lifeless body in his car. They took his wallet and phone to make it look like a robbery, as Tund had instructed. Tund's reaction. When news of Chaik's death broke the next morning, Tund acted shocked and devastated. He attended the emergency meeting at Global Energy Corp, where the board discussed the tragedy and offered their condolences. Throughout the day, Tund played the part of the grieving friend perfectly. He even visited Chaik's family, offering his support and promising to help in any way he could. To everyone else, he seemed like a loyal and heartbroken friend. But behind closed doors, Tund's mind was in turmoil. The reality of what he had done began to sink in, and for the first time, he questioned whether it had been worth it. Little did he know, the seeds of his betrayal would soon bear fruit, and not in the way he had hoped. The investigation. The murder of Chaik sent shockwaves through the oil and gas industry, his family, and the entire village of Omuoma. How could such a promising young man, loved and respected by so many, meet such a brutal end? The police were under intense pressure to solve the case, but the truth proved elusive. The initial investigation. The first 48 hours were critical. Chaik's car, abandoned on the side of a dimly lit road, became the primary crime scene. Investigators found his lifeless body riddled with stab wounds, a clear sign of premeditation. His wallet and phone were missing, leading the police to initially suspect a robbery gone wrong. However, something didn't add up. The level of violence suggested a personal motive rather than a simple robbery. Witnesses in the area reported hearing a commotion but saw no clear suspects. Surveillance cameras in the vicinity were either malfunctioning or too far to capture useful footage. disgruntled employees as suspects. The investigation shifted focus to Global Energy Corp, where Chaik worked. As managing director, Chaik had overseen a recent restructuring that resulted in several layoffs. The police suspected that one or more of these former employees might have sought revenge. A list of disgruntled former employees was compiled, and detectives began questioning them one by one. While some expressed anger and bitterness over losing their jobs, none had solid connections to the crime. Alibis were checked, and most of the suspects were ruled out. For weeks, the case stalled, with no concrete leads. The media began to criticize the police for their lack of progress, and Chaik's family grew increasingly frustrated. Meanwhile, Tund, pretending to be in mourning, continued his daily routine. A mysterious call. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a tech-savvy officer reviewing Chaik's phone records. While the phone itself was missing, the service provider was able to retrieve call logs. Among the usual work-related and family calls, there was an unusual number that appeared several times in the weeks leading up to Chaik's death. This number was traced to a burner phone, commonly used to avoid detection. Further investigation revealed that the phone had been purchased in cash at a local market, making it difficult to trace the buyer. However, the police were able to obtain a list of all calls made from this number. One call, placed the night before the murder, was particularly suspicious. It lasted nearly an hour and was made to another burner phone. With the help of advanced tracking software, the police discovered that the second phone had been active near Chaik's office and later near the crime scene. Cracking the connection. While the burner phones provided a lead, they weren't enough to identify the culprits. The police decided to place the numbers under surveillance. Days later, the first burner phone made a call to a known associate of one of the disgruntled former employees. This connection reignited suspicions about the layoffs and prompted the police to revisit their earlier interviews. Tund, who had initially been overlooked because of his close relationship with Chaik, was questioned again. His demeanor during the interview was calm, even mournful, but a seasoned detective noticed inconsistencies in his answers. When asked about his whereabouts on the night of the murder, Tund claimed he had been at home, but he hesitated slightly before responding, a subtle detail that didn't go unnoticed. The turning point. The investigation reached a turning point when one of the accomplices, a former employee named Emeka, was arrested for an unrelated offense. During interrogation, Emeka accidentally revealed details about Chaik's murder that hadn't been made public. Emeka admitted to being hired to carry out the attack, but refused to name the person who orchestrated it. However, further questioning revealed that Emeka had been in contact with Tund in the days leading up to the murder. Armed with this information, the police began monitoring Tund's communications. A forensic examination of his work computer revealed deleted emails and messages that hinted at tension between him and Chaik. Though circumstantial, the evidence painted a picture of growing resentment. The final piece of evidence. The breakthrough came when the police managed to recover a voicemail from Emeka's phone. The message, left by Tund, contained coded language that investigators quickly deciphered as instructions for the night of the murder. Though Tund had been careful, he hadn't anticipated the level of scrutiny his actions would face. When confronted with the voicemail, Tund's composure cracked. At first, he denied any involvement, claiming the message was misunderstood. But as detectives laid out the mounting evidence, phone records, the voicemail, and witness testimonies, he realized his web of lies was unraveling. In a dramatic confession, Tund broke down, admitting to orchestrating the attack out of jealousy and bitterness. He wept as he recounted how he had felt overshadowed by Chaik's success and had wanted to level the playing field. The aftermath. The confession stunned everyone. Those who knew Tund and Chaik could hardly believe that such a close friendship had ended in betrayal. Tund's arrest made headlines, and the trial that followed was watched closely by the public. The police were praised for their tenacity and attention to detail in solving the case, which had seemed unsolvable at first. However, the tragedy left a deep scar, not just on Chaik's family, but also on the community that had once celebrated the friendship of the two boys from Umuoma. The investigation, though successful, became a somber reminder of how envy could destroy even the strongest bonds. The verdict: Tund was arrested and tried for murder. During the trial, he expressed remorse, but his confession did little to mitigate his sentence. The court found him guilty and sentenced him to death. The village of Oumuamua was devastated. The story of Chike and Tund, once a symbol of hope, had become a cautionary tale about envy and betrayal. A legacy of lessons. Years later, Chike's name was remembered with respect and admiration. His story became a lesson in ambition and generosity. Tund's downfall, on the other hand, served as a warning about the dangers of envy. In Oumuamua, their tale was passed down through generations, a reminder of the delicate balance between loyalty and jealousy, ambition and contentment. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share, and click on the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.